We are in Kufit Gimel Halacha Test.
Kufit Gimel
Halacha Test. The Mechaber says, in Bishul Ervid Kechavan Kamacha Ben Drusai. If a guy cooks food Kamacha Ben Drusai, we had seen in Halacha Ches that once the guy cooks the Kamacha Ben Drusai, without you doing anything, the food is asur. So if he did that, so the food is asur. The Gomer Yisroel, and now the Yid helped in the finishing of the food. Okay, the guy had done the beginning, the food was asur. Now the Yid finished off the food. So what's the din? Yesh lesser. The food you should make the food. You should consider the food to be asur. El Kain who erev Shabbos or erev Yontif or sheyesh hefsem meruv b'davar. Except in cases where there's some kind of special reason to want to be makel, like it's erev Shabbos. I mean, the person he has no food for Shabbos other than this, or it's hefsem meruba. So in that kind of a case, we're going to be samach on the mekilim. And the Ramah says v'yesh matir b'cholinya. The Ramah says there are those who make all the time v'chein and that's our minik is to be makel, to say that even if you participated in the end of the cooking, that's good enough. Okay, and what we're going to do...
That's the Mechaber?
The Mechaber said you should be machmir except in cases of special... Or, and the Ramah said, no, you can make it all the time. Yes, but some make it all the time, and you can follow that.
One thing. If the whole evening is out, one evening is out Kashrus. So if the only fellow only cooks out Michael Ben Yisroel, that's not somewhere where you invite a person to eat a meal over by Michael Ben Yisroel. It's got to be fully cooked. So why would the Mechaber be machmer in such a case, even though it could be Michael Ben Yisroel has a shem achila on it, but it's not in Chasnas here.
Okay. Your question really is the food, seemingly the food is not to be oil shulchan lachem, but it's only a third cooked. You don't serve food that's oil shulchan. I'm pretty sure we talked about that in one halachos before. If not, we'll talk about it. Okay, I'm pretty sure we talked about that already. The Aruch asked that question. That how could it be oil shulchan lachem if it's only a third cooked? Okay.
I don't recall. You
okay, so that's because we haven't had shared. We haven't had shared so long.
Yeah, I'm sorry. My memory only is.
Okay. His question was, okay, the din is that if a guy cooks the food a third, so it's like barely edible, the food is asur. It's now bishul. So his question is, well, in order to be bishul, it has to be oil shulchan lachem. Food has to be, a fancy food. If food is only barely edible, it's not oil shulchan lachem. It seems to be the opposite. It's impossible to be oil shulchan lachem when it's just barely edible. You don't serve food at a wedding that's barely edible. That doesn't look good. Okay, so now what we're going to do today, there's two parts to this thing. The first part was what we're going to do today is to talk about what's this machlokes, what's the reasons or what's the rayas that there's for this machlokes, whether you can participate in the end of the cooking or not. That's what we talk about today. The other part is to understand the Ramah was makel. The Ramah said there are certain things you're allowed to do, and that's the second part is understanding. So, in which case was the Ramah makel? In what cases would he be willing to be makel? That we're not going to do. Mitzvah next time. Okay. So the way it goes like this. The many Rishonim talk about this machlokes, but the main part of the argument is in the Rashba, in terms of Bayis, where the Rashba brings. He had mentioned that the guy cooks it kamacha ben drusai it's asur, and then he brings two shittas as to what the din should be is if the yid participate in the end. Okay, he brings to Rabbeinu Hananel who says that it's mutter, so that it's asur.
Is this a bear? What is that?
This is the Rashba on Teres Habayis. And he brings Rabbeinu Hananel says that it's asur, and others say that it's mutter. Okay.
Is this just turning on the fire or higher or what?
That we're going to talk about next time is what we mean with that the yid helped in the cooking. But the point here is that the guy cooked it already enough to make it asur, and now the yid is doing something after that. Can he save it after it's already become asur? Okay. The Rashba, in the end, the Rashba is machmir, and the Ra'ah in the Bedek Habayis, no, in Bedek Habayis argues he's makel. Okay, so the machlokes revolves around this right there on the page here. That's the machlokes. Okay. So the Rashba first explains what's the reason why somebody would want to be machmir. What should be the reason to be machmir? He says, we said the din is if the yid cooks it until it's kamacha ben right, participates before that time, that's considered the yid was part of the cooking, and therefore the food is mutter. Okay, up until a third or half, or a third or half, that's considered the yid cooked it, and it's the yid participated. It's considered Bishul Yisroel. So that is to say that after the food is a third cooked, it's cooked. The cooking is over. We finished what we had to do. So in Cain, if the guy cooked it until a third, the cooking is over. Okay? Then I'm saying this backwards. Okay. That in order to say that the food is after a third, the food is cooked now. It doesn't help to participate afterwards. It's too late. And the others hold that no, this that we said that up till a third, the Yid can be, if the Yid did up to a third of the cooking, that was just as a kula. We're willing to say Kamach ben Drusai is cooking lahaka. We won't say that if that means that it'll be a kula for you. If that's going to turn into a chumrah, this is a kula of Bishul that we say up to a third is considered cooked. But look, if you want to be the other side, we can also be makel. And we could say is that the food is not cooked until it's fully cooked. So we could be makel on both sides. So mekir, we're willing to be makel side that you can cook till a third, and that you did that's enough, or you can cook it even later, and that's also good.
In other words, if a Jew cooks the ben drusai, a guy can't answer it afterwards.
Right.
Clear.
Yeah, that's
If
true.
a Jew cooks less than ben drusai, a guy could answer it afterwards.
Going macabre.
Yes, that's correct. Yes,
That's
that's
clear.
yes, that's also correct.
Okay.
Yes, we saw that.
So obviously in a different cooking, not in the same one.
Yes, we saw that also right. That's correct. If the Yid just did a little bit and then they took it off the fire, that was the Gemara's case. He took it off the fire before it got kamach ben drusai, then the food is usher. So we say, so we're willing to be makel to say if you did already a third, you did something, you already did cooking. But we don't have to say that l'chumra. After the third, it's also cooked. Okay. Now the Ra'ah uses words that people very much attach to the shita, but it's not a hezber for the shita. It's just a sort of like a technicality. He calls this an isser hachoyzel hechsheroi. That's how he describes it. He says this is an isser that's choyzel hechsheroi. It's a description, which is it used to be aser till it was a third cooked, it was aser, and then it's choyzel hechsheroi. It goes back to being mutter. Okay. He's not saying that the way it reads to me as the hezber. It's not like this, some kind of a rule that Yisurim can be undone. He's not trying to make a rule out of it. He's just describing what he's talking about. And he says it in a very specific spot. I'll tell you in a second what it is. By one of the Rajba's rayas, he says it to describe a raya, or to answer a raya, but it's not the hezber for it. It's not that he's trying to say there's a rule that Yisurim can be undone. That's not what it means. It's just, he's describing, this is an Isser that used to be, which is strange. It's unusual that something that's Usser and becomes mutter. It's like saying worms that are in the stomach are Usser and then they get into the flesh to become mutter, right? You can't say, then they become Usser to become mutter, right? That's it.
They say that
I mean, you have a call.
What?
Say that left. Okay, so
Others say that he says that Isra Choyz L'Sher, they put a lot of meaning into those words, and they try to understand it. He seems to be just describing what he holds, rather than that's not the hezbollah. That's just a view of what's happening.
Nafkamir comes out of that.
I don't remember at this point. No, I don't remember now.
You have that rule in your Chayz veneer. There comes.
Yeah, well, but the Chayz veneer, we don't say that. Yeah, we wouldn't say Isra becomes mutter. We would not say that. Okay. Okay, so there are two rayas. The Mekilim bring two rayas that they're right. Okay, so we have a question here. Should we make the machar on this? The Mekilim bring two rayas. The first is like this. The Gemara says, if a guy starts off the cooking of the food, and the Yid comes along and finishes off the cooking, the Gemara says the food is mutter. Okay, the Gemara doesn't say he has to do it at any certain point in the cooking. The Gemara says the guy put the food onto the fire, the Yid finishes it off, then it's okay. The Gemara doesn't say when he does something. It sounds like whenever he wants to. It doesn't sound like he has to do it at a certain point. Whenever he wants to. The guy put it on, the Yid finishes it, it's good enough.
So when if it's 90% cooked by a guy and he finishes off, it should also be good.
More than that is, the Ra'ah says, and this is really for next time, the Ra'ah says, even if it's completely cooked, as long as the Yid could still make the food better, it's also mutter.
It's like pass this roll.
So that's for next time. What does the Yid have to do? We're not going to talk about that part of it. But the Ra'ah says that even it's 100% cooked. He says even if it's fully cooked, it will be good. Okay. Now, the Rajba, in arguing on that, says like this. He has two reasons to argue. What happened in the other case? The Gemara has two cases. One is that the guy put it on first, and the Yid finished off the cooking. The one says that's mutter. The other case the Gemara has is if the Yid started the cooking and the guy finished it off. And what's the din in that case? The din in that case is the food is usher. Okay? Why is the food usher? Because the Yid didn't cook it. Now, is that talking about that the Yid cooked it k'ma'achar ben drusai or not k'ma'achar ben drusai? It's obviously talking about that the Yid didn't cook it k'ma'achar ben drusai. Because if the Yid had cooked it k'ma'achar ben drusai, the guy can't answer it afterwards. We know that. The guy can't answer it afterwards. So when the Gemara says the Yid put it on, and then the guy finished the cooking, the Gemara doesn't mean that he did it, the Yid did it k'ma'achar ben drusai, yet the Gemara didn't bother to tell. Somehow we were supposed to understand that when we say the Yid put it on, it means just he put it on at the beginning of the cooking and not the whole cooking. It doesn't mean to say all cookings. Okay, and the Rajba also adds, he says the Gemara uses the word hiniach Yisroel. The first person, when it describes the first person, that he says hiniach. Let's say he was mavashal. The Rajba says that word is chosen on purpose because it means is you put it on, meaning you did the beginning of the cooking. Okay, it's like a code word to tell us you only did the beginning of the cooking. So both halves of the Gemara make that point. If the Yid did the beginning of the cooking and the guy got into Kamach Ben Josoy, it's Asher. The guy did it the beginning of the cooking up to Kamach Ben Josoy, the Yid did the ending, then it's mutter. What happens if the case would be that the person did more than Kamach Ben Josoy? Then both those endings would be the opposite. If the Yid had done the beginning up to Kamach Ben Josoy, it would be mutter. If the guy did it, it would be Asher. So the Gemara is, the Rashi says, it's got to be talking about only cases that are before Kamach Ben Josoy. Okay? That makes sense? Okay. Second ayah. The second ayah he brings this. He says the Gemara, after saying these bunch of cases, the Gemara says the rule. The rule is, it's only usher. It's the food is mutter. The food is only usher if the yid doesn't help in the beginning or the end of the cooking. Okay. That's what the Gemara says. After giving these simple cases, it says if the Yid does the beginning or the end, then it's mutter. So he says, why do the Gemara have to repeat itself? What's the point of saying this statement over again and saying that? And so now we're going to summarize. I mean, it's not like this was 12 pages of Gemara. This is 3 lines. So we say a summary is that you should know that it's not us unless the Yid doesn't do anything in the beginning or the end. So the Ra'ah says it's coming to tell us that it's only that anything that the Yid does can make it mutter. It's coming like okay, what the Rashba says. It's saying even if the Yid at the very end, it should also be good. It doesn't make a difference. At any point, it's good enough. Okay? The Rashba says that if the Ra'ah is right, then even if the food is completely cooked. Now I told you the Ra'ah says that even if the food is completely cooked, but the Ra'ah says even when I say the food that's completely cooked, you could be meko, it's only if it's mitztamek v'yafaloi. Okay, mitztamek v'yafaloi means that what I'm doing still makes it taste better. Let's say I take a piece of bread and I toast it. Okay, so the bread is fully cooked, but I'm making it even better than it was. I'm adding to it. But if I take I take a potato that's fully cooked and I just warm it up, put it in the microwave for 10 seconds to warm it up, even the Ra'ah holds that that's not good. So the Rashi says, according to the way you're reading, the Gemara says, even if the Yid's at the very end, if the end means anything, end would even be after it's fully cooked. Okay? Okay. That's the Mekil. The Machmirim bring the rise like this. The Gemara says a case of a guy singeing the hair off of an animal. Okay, it's burning off the hair off the animal, for whatever reason. And the Gemara says that heat cooks some of the more delicate pieces of skin. Okay, its ears. Okay, cooks certain pieces of skin. So the Gemara says that cooking would make the food usher. And the Gemara ends up saying that it's not true. The Gemara says it's not because the Gemara didn't have kavana. That's not our point. The Gemara considers, but that the guy doing this thing should cook the meat enough that the food should be usher.
I said this a while ago.
Yes, we passed this case. So the Rashba says, this is a Gemara. So the Rashba asks, he says, tell me something. He says, if you're just burning off the hairs, you couldn't have cooked this piece of skin very much. So maybe you cooked the kamach ben tray, even a very thin, easy to cook piece of food. How much could it cook? You think of the guy sitting with a cigarette lighter, okay, and just burning off hairs. How much could you cook already? It's a tiny little bit of heat. He says it must be he only cooked the kamach ben tray, and yet the Gemara is saying you're not allowed to eat the meat. Okay, that's what he said. Now the Ra has a very simple answer to that question. Okay? So the question is, the Gemara is saying is, even if the guy cooked the kamach even a tiny bit, the food stays usher. The Ra says you have a big deal.
Because you didn't do anything.
We all agree that if the guy only cooks the kamach ben tray, it's usher forever.
Until.
It can only be, what would happen if the Yid would do more cooking afterwards? Maybe it would be good to them. The Gemara didn't talk about that case. So the Ra says, so what? The Gemara is saying it's usher because it's true. It is usher because it's kamach ben tray. What would happen if the Yid will do more later on? There's nothing. They shouldn't stop it. Okay. Okay. So one last thing to say is, I told you we're going to be short. One last thing to say is that the way back in Kufyat Beis, we spoke about that there seems to be a steer between the Mechaber. The Mechaber in our case says that you should, if a Yid cooks the end of the cooking, it's usher, right? If the guy does the beginning, the Yid does the end, it's usher. And then the Mechaber in Kufyat Beis seems to say that it's mutter. It appears to be a steer in the Mechabers. By pas, he seems to be Meko. And we answered, okay, the Beis Yosef himself asked the question in the Bedek Kabayis, answers this question, and he says, according to the way we understood it, he gives an answer that the difference is that in our case, the food was taken off the fire, and the case over there was that the food stayed on the fire. Okay, so there, if it's still the same cooking, the guy did the beginning and then you did something before it got off the fire, that it's mutter, that everyone holds that it's mutter, and in our case, where the food was taken off the fire, and the guy did his cooking, and then it was taken off, and then they participate, that's the case that it's us. So that's what we talked about over there. Okay? I'm mentioning it now, first of all, to remind you, but also to tell you, it makes the riot, all the riot, I'm not going to go through them, but the riots that I just mentioned to you don't read so well according to the Beli Tobias. He's making it that there are going to be cases that the Yid can participate in the cooking, that everyone's going to agree that the Yid can participate in the cooking even after it's Kamach Ben Drusoi, and the riots that we just brought are not going to read so well anymore. It's going to make it harder to read the Gemara according to that terms. Okay? The Beis Yosef is saying there's a chiluk between whether it's on the fire or off the fire, and I'm not going through it, but if we go through the riots, you see they don't read so well according to that chiluk. The
Yishuv is not so good.
The Yishuv, that's the question of the Yishuv, because the Rishonim are saying that these riots are coming from the Rishonim. We're being the Yashiv that why would the Mechaber over there pass them this way? It's a Rabbeinu Yerucham. It's a Rabbeinu Yerucham says the reason why here we're Machmer, here we're Mekel is because of this chiluk. The Beis Yosef brings it, but to say that takes away from what the Rishonim said. The Rishonim's riots that they had don't read so well anymore. So, which maybe that's a kasha back over there. But from there, Lisa stuck. So there we took maybe other answers. I'm just saying there's at least some questions. Okay.